hashtag causeascene. Excuse me, there's a content warning, all right? My job is to make white people uncomfortable. Okay, you laugh, but when you get uncomfortable, don't say I didn't warn you, okay? That is my intention, because tech will not change until white people get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so this is my job. So how I got here, I entered tech 4 years ago after my father passed away. I'm an only child, and so the thought I've always, and I'm not being hyperbolic, I always thought if my dad died, I would die. It would kill me. I didn't. I lived, so I had to come up with a plan. And so I was in education at the time, and I hated kids. I don't like your kids because you tell them they're special and they're only special to you, so really stop saying that. So they just become a headache for me. And I hated that, and I was always more of I wasn't a producer of tech, because nobody in my community was talking about producing tech. But I knew I was more than a consumer of tech, because if I had a problem, I YouTube it and create a website or whatever. So I knew I had an interest. My dad left me some money, so I'm like, let me figure this thing out. And I was decided, I was going to learn, an educator, so I'm going to learn the language of tech, so I was going to learn the code. So that's how I started speaking, because you guys need to stop telling people how easy it is to learn the code. It's not. And what happens is adult learners internalize that lack, and they quit because you're telling them, everybody's around them saying how easy it is, and when they can't do it, it's my fault. Any learning is hard, and learning a language is even harder. So please don't do new people coming in development that disservice of saying how easy it is. So I started speaking about mentoring, and as a black woman from the South, I really never wanted to talk about inclusion because this is my life. And I don't want to talk to white people about this stuff. Good God Almighty. But every conference so I was doing coding, and I was like, you know what? I could do this, but these people need a lot of other skills that I have that they don't have. So let me try to do that. And so the reason, and I like what Sandra said, I made this up. I'm still making it up. I have an undergraduate in interior design, a master's degree in training and development. I just dropped out of a doctoral program for business administration, technology, entrepreneurship, because I'm sick of trying to prove myself to white people. It is what it is. So I've come at this from all different, I'm a certified special needs teacher, I taught high school, I've taught people how to work with kids in after school programs, summer camps, so I know about how adults learn. And so I was like, okay, they think they're smart, but they're really not that freaking smart. So what I'm gonna do is speak at conferences to tell them what I can do, because I'm not gonna let you tell me what my value is. I'm gonna tell you what my value is. So last year, I spoke at 19 conferences, and I keynoted 5. And at that point, some kind of way I kept shifting to the inclusion, and I was like, good God, okay, I'm coming. But it was pissing me off, because everybody wants to talk about inclusion and diversity, and it's a marketing PR thing. Nobody wants to pay for it, nobody wants to invest the time, and what you're doing is harming people in this community, and we're creating products and services that are harming the global market, and you do not have the right to do that. So, at the end of last year, I was just pissed off. Utterly mad. And I was on the phone with my friend, and I was like, you know what? I want to be disruptive in 2018. They're not listening to me anyway. So let me say what the hell is on my mind. And so we were like, she's like, yeah, let's cause a scene. Hashtag cause a scene. Bam, it just came out of nowhere. So I had just been playing around with it, just adding it to tweets, calling people out. I'm just so sick of people doing stuff and getting away with it. I'm tired of that. So I was just add it to the thing, and people start, oh, that thing. I was like, oh, people are paying attention to this thing. So it officially launched on International Women's Day of this year. When I gave my first talk, there was, why aren't all women making gains in tech? Because only white women are making gains in tech, and that's a big issue, because white women also benefit from privilege, and no one wants to talk about that. That Native women, women of color, women with disabilities, we're not making gains in tech. And so I had that talk, and it was really raw, and black people were clapping, and the white people were like, oh, and I was like, oh, that went well. That's exactly what I wanted them to experience. So this is where this came from. It is the strategic disruption of the strategic disruption of the status quo and technical organizations, communities, and events. All right, no, I'm going backwards. All right, there we go. So this is the hashtag, because you can't put a hashtag in there, but I wanted the name hashtag, so I had to get hashtag.com. I was determined about that. And so this is the website. And so as you can see, it's time to change. It's time for there to be a change. I'm sick of coddling people. I'm sick of, oh, he didn't know any better, or oh, she didn't know. There's enough research online, enough people talking about this, enough people talking about these at conferences that I'm tired of people getting the pass. So I started with merchandise. I was like, people loved some of the things I say in my talks. So I was like putting them on shirts, and people were buying them. I was like, oh, okay, all right, I can do that. And then I started, so the shirt thing, I was like, one day I kept saying that marginalized individuals, I started with underrepresented, but underrepresented includes white women, and unless you LGBTQ, have a disability, I don't include you anymore because you benefit from privilege. Okay, so I am talking about people who are marginalized, who aren't able to get the platform at all. That's what my conferences are for. My conference is for the one that I'm having in London, and thank you, Sandra, because Mozilla is one of my partners. I will be hosted at Ma's house there to do my conference. And I also added a career coaching fair, because everybody's always talking about, oh, we can't find these individuals. Why we can't find these individuals? I'm an educator. Let me show you how to do this. Because once I show you how to do it, and you say you don't know how, now you tell it's a different conversation, because now you're saying you don't want to do it, which is a whole different thing. And so these are the problems. There's lack of representation of marginalized groups in tech. There's lack of representation of marginalized voices in tech. So it's not just enough to have them there. They need to be able to speak and you listen. And there are a lack of safe spaces for marginalized individuals to tell their stories. So that's what my conference does. Well, that's what everything a hashtag causeascene does. I do not amplify, I very seldom amplify white people's voices on Twitter. That's where I live, unless they're saying something about a marginalized group. But I intentionally amplify trans women, and particularly black trans women, because they're being slaughtered. If you did not know, at least 20 have been killed this year, and they think it's more, but they've probably been misgendered and at the morgue. People are, and there's a serial killer in Jacksonville, Florida, who's killing trans women. These are things we need to talk about, because we have trans women in our communities, and no one's talking about, they don't feel safe. Anybody was familiar about the Linux Foundation, not Linux, adopting the code of conduct? Yes. Okay, come on now, this is open source. Okay, so they just adopted open source by Coralina Imke, who's a transgender woman, and this is her. Over 5,000 organizations have adopted this code of conduct. Google, and she has been getting so much hate mail, so many attacks over this past 2 weeks, that it is ridiculous how people treat people in this community. And this is over a code of conduct. So that tells me there are a lot of men who just don't want to do right. And so we see individuals like her, myself included, we need safe spaces to tell these stories. So this is the challenge. So the first one is the lack of individuals of privilege who care about inclusion in tech, let's be honest. And then there's a lack of individuals of privilege who care about inclusion in tech and who are willing to provide resources, because everybody thinks Kim's gonna do this for free. And I'm like, dude, shut out your mind. If your deposit didn't hit your account, you'd be pissed off. So why do you think just because you give me a hotel room and a plane ticket, I'm supposed to be happy? Wells Fargo needs my mortgage, and that does not translate into mortgage payments. And then it's lack of individuals with privilege who care about inclusion and diversity and are willing to give money, but are also willing to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because let's be honest, white people aren't listening to me. I cannot move this needle. This is white people's work to do. What I'm here to do is give you the resources to learn how to do this, because the other side, whatever you consider the other side, we need to stop saying how ignorant they are. They are well organized, they have their talking points, and that's why Steve Brennan can get on the new, every time he gets on there, some idiot reporter thinks they can bring that man down. That man knows what he's talking about. We are not organized. And we need to do better, or we're not going to change. Well, excuse me, you need to do better, or we're not going to change anything. So I have hashtag causeascene has these are okay. Also, this is my company. I run it. I tell it how to do it. So it's not like I got a committee. I can wake up in the morning and decide to add something, and that's good with me. So, but how I do this, because I'm very strategic about what I do. Because people are like, don't you get burnt out? Nope. I'm very strategic about what I do. I have a community expectation. I focus on safety, education, and making privileged individuals as uncomfortable as I possibly can. And if I see you're not, I can push you just a little bit further, I'm gonna push you. Because I walk around like this every day, so you'll be fine. So these are the different initiatives that I have. I have merchandise, I do conferences, I have a podcast, hashtag causeascene. I have the Legal White Man. People are like, what is that? Well, let me explain to you what my Legal White Man is. And it is a real legal white man, because we do have a Slack channel. It is white men who have power in tech, who have made a commitment to make themselves uncomfortable so that I can be comfortable. If you're not willing to do that, I have absolutely no use for you. And I don't bite my tongue, I don't care. I don't need allies, I'm not trying to collect followers. What I'm trying to do is move a movement so we can move this industry so that it's not causing harm. And I need white men to do it. So if I gotta get, and I'm not, they get their feelings hurt. So it's not like I'm being nice to them either. They gotta do stuff for me, and they gotta do it the way I want them to do it. Which is for the first time, many of them have never done that before. They've never had anybody say, no! Don't do that. They've never had that. So I also have the Alliance, which is about to launch, and it is a membership site to help us on mass scale learn how to do this. So we'll be reading books, I'll be creating content, I'll be bringing in guest speakers to educate white people. Oh my God, you're so ignorant about your own history, about how we got here and how we need to move forward as a team, as a group. We cannot keep doing this individual, because that's how we're getting burnt out. And I have a book that's coming out next year. It's called Not Asking Permission, Giving Notice, but the subtitle is Redefining Capitalism Without White Supremacy. That's gonna be good. All right, so I'm gonna focus on my conference. So my conference is the human side of tech. And I wanna talk about this right quick, because I have a problem with people who call developers technical and everybody else non-technical. If you have that on your CFP, please remove it. They know technology. I have very technical skills. I do not do non-technical talks. And most developers, if they don't figure this out quickly, you are a commodity. And as soon as they get that robot, that machine to figure out what you're doing, you won't have a job. So you better level up your skills and these human skills, because no computer can take my skills. Well, not in my lifetime. So we're going to talk about community expectation. This is the community's work to do. And I'm going to explain how I do that. So I'm very strategic about who I engage with on Twitter. And if I can see that the engagement will educate, let me back up. Because my target market are not people of color or marginalized. My target market are white men and women ages 18 to 34 years old. You're the bottleneck. You're in the way. So this is my target market. So if someone tries to attack me, or I tweet something, they come in my timeline and they say something stupid, I sit back and say, okay, is this, because okay, I'm also not a martyr. I'm doing this for money. So I'm not gonna just be out there running after Nazis and no. I'm a black woman in the South. I know where I'm safe. So if it's some little jerk tech person, Lord bless him, and some mediocre white guy, or some white woman with tears, God, you guys do that a lot. Not all white women. Yeah, all white women. If you're in my timeline, you're doing it. Get over it. So I will sit back and I'll say, will my 5,000 followers learn something from this if I escalate, if I gaslight them just a little bit? Yeah, I think they will. So let's make a game of this, okay? So I go and get comfortable make sure I have full battery or plug my thing in, and then I'll quote retweet. I never respond to them directly. When I do that, I have trained, and yes, I mean trained, my followers to attack. That means you need to engage this person. If they're saying something ignorant and you know why, then you need to start educating this person. It's not my job to do. All I'm there is to get, because another reason I don't block people on Twitter, because you need to see all the ugliness that I have to put up with. I'm no longer here to make you safe, to make you comfortable. I don't care about your feelings. I've been walking around with this. I'll be 50 next year. I've been walking around like this, being attacked all my freaking life. It's time for you to feel what we've been feeling. So I do it on purpose. I do it and I get the person who's gonna make you the most uncomfortable that you have to engage with. And if you don't engage, oh, trust me, I'm gonna call you out on Twitter. So that's the first thing I do. I also don't work for free. And I add a bullshit tax to my price. So, because I recognize that you don't want to pay for this, but you need the skill. So first of all, you've probably screwed up something, and now you need me to come fix it. And then I'm going to have to deal with some jerks. Oh yeah, you're going to have to pay some money. This is the fee, and you're going to have to add some other stuff down there. And depending on how much you want to negotiate, oh, that fee's going up. I'm not going down. Because now you're getting on my nerves. Because you don't see value in what I'm doing. And I also do that because how am I going to set a standard for women to get paid if my prices are low? I understand that people are going to be coming behind me, and I need to set a standard of what the expectation of pricing it should be. Okay, I'm not non-technical. I have more degrees and more education than most of you people typing on these computers. Let's be honest. And that's why I dropped out of my program. Black women are the most educated and the most degreed in this country, and we get shit pay. And I was like, I'm not going continuing to go into debt for people who don't value me. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to tell you. And so that's why you got a bullshit tax. You're paying for my student loans. That's what that is. All right. I'm an expert at leveraging inclusion as a business strategy. So for me, this is not about, oh, this is the right thing to do. I don't even get into all that. No, this is, we have to stop creating products or services that are harming our global community. A white man in Ireland cannot create a product effectively for people in Colombia without having a perspective for that community. That's just the bottom line. And we need to stop being arrogant enough to think that we can do that. I'm a business. So hashtag causeascene is the movement arm of my business, and the Kim Crayton LLC is the business strategist part of that. And my community knows they have to pay. If I say I'm running a conference, and this will be my 5th conference this year. I've done Chicago, San Francisco, Berlin, Scotland. London will be my 5th one this year. If I put out a tweet and say, because I pay my speakers a speaker fee plus they're local speakers, but they're transportation to and from the event. If I say I don't have enough because I got to make a profit, I put a tweet out there. If I say I need $1,000, 5 people will send me $1,000. They know what their responsibilities are. And they better not ask me what I'm doing with the extra. It's none of your damn business. I work hard at what I do. So my community knows that. So when I start having, Mozilla is the only corporation who's ever given me money. And that was because Sandra knew about what I was doing from the very beginning, and she got me tapped in. So when I go to corporations and you tell me, no, this is not something, that's interesting because your community has been paying quite well. So what you're telling me is that this is just that important to you, not that it's not important to them. So now there's a different conversation, because there have been conferences who tried to do this, like AltaConf, and she had to close it down because she wasn't getting the corporate sponsorship she needed. I wanted to do something, I wanted to do differently. I wanted to start with building my community first, so that a corporation can't argue with me about my numbers. You can't argue with me that the community does not want this. What you're now saying is you just don't care about this, which is a whole different conversation. So focus on safety. So it's a traveling conference. It's a conference. It was an experiment this year. I love to experiment with stuff. It's an experiment with this year. Next year is going to be formalized. I'll do one every quarter, so I'll only do 4. And it's, like I said, it's designed for those marginalized people to tell their stories. You need to know about their stories because you need to know how to design products and services that help them solve their problems. We don't need any more scooters. God, why would, we don't need a DNA and a Spotify playlist. We don't. I have some serious ethical concerns with someone who's giving you money to do their DNA, and now you're saying, oh, let's, for fun, jollies, let's put a playlist. Your average consumer is going to think that's cool. They don't see the slippery slope of that, of who else you can give their DNA to, and how else you can manipulate that DNA until it's too late. They will share what they're working on. They talk about anything. They just need to feel safe. And this is an opportunity for these people who are often not, even when they speak on the conference stage, they don't get to talk about what is really important to them. They get up and they give these great technology talks, and you don't know that maybe last year they tried to commit suicide. You don't know that. These are the stories we need to hear. We need to hear the human side. The technology is great, but humans create technology. So I have a code of conduct. So the primary goal, I said, is to make the largest number of participants safe. Because if your most marginalized feel safe, then everybody feels safe. And it's irrespective of everything, anybody's welcome. But you have to understand it is speaker focused, which means I have an attendee expectation. So I'm the only conference that I know has this. And I expect my attendees to behave in a certain manner. You need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Somebody's going to say something that's going to trigger you. Deal with it, sit with it. We'll deal with it later. Listen, internalize, and sit with it. Know that the speaker is the expert of their story. None of that, Lord have mercy. That's what we talked about, people doing Q&A. That's why people don't do Q&A, because somebody always got some outlier thing that had nothing to do with the talk, but you want to disprove them or prove how smart you are. That doesn't happen in my conference. You would get your feelings hurt. Understand that it's not about you. Anything that I see, I don't have a committee. If I see or feel that you've done something that needs to be addressed, it will be addressed, and you will go and you will not get a refund. Not happening. And it's the only voices that matter in my conferences are the voices I chose to be there. So anybody in the audience, you're there to learn, but your opinion does not matter. And that's how I make a safe space for individuals. So the education part. All right, so here's the teacher in me. Let's define terms. Privilege is just about access, because we have these. People don't get all upset about these terms. So I use this picture because who's seen these macaques in they're in Japan in the hot springs, and they make them all seem cute. Okay, that's not the real story. See, I had to watch David Attenborough, because what happens is there's one matriarchal family that gets to stay in the hot water, and everybody else is freezing their butts off on the outside. And then there are male monkeys who are around who are trying to protect them, trying to get some good favor so they can mate and get in the water. But the other monkeys are sitting out there freezing. So it's about access. That's all it is. Privilege means about access. And also the choice to use that access. Because a lot of people have access and I don't feel it. I'm good. I don't have to use that. Underrepresented, simply about numbers. That's it. Simply about numbers. Women are underrepresented in tech. That's it. I have 3 apples. I have 7 apples. Which pal has the most apples? It's not that complicated, all right? But when we talk about marginalized, we're talking about treatment. And again, I have to make this a caveat. It is not about individual treatment. It is about how groups of people are treated. So although women are underrepresented in tech, most white women are not marginalized. Diversity, just about variety. I have a box of 4 crayons, and unless I'm an artist, I ain't much I can do with that. And give me a box of 64 crayons, woo, I can go to town. All it is. So that tells you, just by my example, having more crayons in most instances, unless you really can manipulate that 4, it's better to have more. right? Inclusion is just about experience. It's simple. Where we get into trouble is you can't tell me what my experience is. You cannot say I'm having an inclusive experience, and that's the problem. These companies are having these, oh, well, we brought them in, but they keep leaving. Yep. Because you've done nothing to change your culture. You've done nothing to change your policies. Just because you brought somebody in, that does not make them feel inclusive. And you, as the business owner, does not get to say if they feel included or not. They tell you that. And that's the same thing with allies. You don't get to say that you, oh my God, if I hear one more white woman say, I'm on your side, you don't get to say if you're on my side. Your demonstrated behavior will tell me if you're an ally, and then I will say to you, hey, thank you, because I'm never going to call you ally. You don't get to self-identify as allies. That's not how that works. So inclusion is about experience. It is not about equality. There is no way in hell. How old are you, sir? Paul?
I turned 35 in 2 weeks.
Okay, so Paul has a very successful business in Dublin. He's a white guy. And there's no way in hell me and Paul can be equal unless Paul goes sit down somewhere, take a nap, and when he gets back up, crawls while I run. It is not about equality. It is about putting the needs of the marginalized over, prioritizing the needs of the marginalized over the people who have privilege. That's the only way this is going to work. Which requires privilege to be uncomfortable, because they've never had to be anybody prioritized over them before. But this is not, you're never going to have someone who's been harassed, someone who's been sexually molested, someone who's been accosted by the police in their outside life. You're never going to make them feel safe if you do not prioritize their needs. So you're never going to have inclusion. It's not about quotas. So you don't get to go get a Latino, lesbian, who's on the spectrum and check off 3 boxes. That's not how that works. It's about experience. So again, I'm also a researcher. So I like to, this is how we debunk a lot of the things that people say that, you know, that James, what's this dude, last name, what's the, James? Dude. Whatever, yeah, that dude. All right. Instead of arguing with him, I'm a researcher. So I'm gonna say, what's the validity of your argument? How sound is that argument? And then, not only that, but can we replicate what you just said? Not the data, not the science from the 50s that was racist that has been proven wrong. Oh, we're talking about can we use some new data? When you can't do that, then your assertion is wrong. It's incorrect. So I'm not even going to argue with you. I've said that point, and people get pissed off because I'll walk off. I'm like, I boom, boom, and go. I made my point. I'm not going to argue back and forth. And that's how we lose this. That's how Steve Brandon and Alex Jones can really get you, because we sit there and keep doing. No, you make your point and you leave the room. We make assumptions every day. That's just who we are. There is also, please never say that there's no bias technology. We're all biased. We're humans, we all are biased. The things we create are biased. What we like to do is minimize that bias, because we make assumptions. It's those unchecked assumptions that get us in trouble. And then, like I just said, a bias, and then people want to always talk about unconscious bias. A lot of that unconscious bias is pretty doggone conscious bias. But we're using that as an excuse. So this is how I make privileged individuals uncomfortable. So these are some of the talks we've had. She is a software engineer. She talked about her bipolar disorder, how she can't get out of the bed, how she's been has to go to treatment and go to and her meds, and how she has to have conversations with her managers, and how safe she feels about that. Are we having these conversations? Do we know what the people around us are dealing with on a daily basis? He talked about Brian grew up in a very rural part of Texas, where he did not feel free until he went to San Francisco. And he talks about how that still affects him today. Stephanie has a it's not she does have an eating disorder, but her eating disorder is an outcome of her eating. It's actually a medical condition. She can only eat safely 5 foods. So think about tech, how much food we have in tech companies, how often we eat around tech companies. And she gets shamed for it. So it's a medical condition which she should not have to disclose at her job. But because she gets shamed about it from her fellow peers, then it becomes, oh, well, let Stephanie pick the food because she is so picky. Now, why would you have somebody who has this kind of picking food for everybody else? You think it's funny, but it's not for her. It's painful. And so when she goes to interviews, that's something she really has to think about. When she's talking to them, she's had to turn that she can't. So even though she has skills as a developer, even though they have skills as a developer, she can't use them everywhere because she can't feel included everywhere or safe, because this has turned into an eating disorder for her. This young lady, this broke my heart. When she was speaking, she actually experienced PTSD in her talk, and we had to take a moment. So she was raped, and because Facebook changed who could contact you through iMessages, she opened up her iMessage and her rapist's face was right there. We don't get to do that. You don't and even with the new, have you noticed, I went through Facebook and LinkedIn. Why is everything that should be about my safety automatically turned on? I don't want this. All those things should be default off, and I get to choose how much access you have. But no, they turn everything on by default. So if you don't know that you need to go in there, because no one's sending you a thing, say, hey, turn these things off. Think about the harm we're causing. And then everybody says, oh, let's get off Facebook. That's not a reality for a lot of people. Think about the grandmother whose kids and grandkids are across the country, and that's the only way she has to see how they're growing up. We just have to do better tech. And he just talked about being a black man working in tech. And at the end, I always do a Q&A, inclusion Q&A, because at that point, everybody feels safe. And we're sitting around, and I asked the white people, I was like, tell me an instance when you recognize that there was something in you that made you scared about black people or something. And when the guy said, walking down the street, and he was sitting next to me, Trey was sitting next to me, I was like, how could you communicate to him how that makes you feel? And he gave the stock, the patented, yeah, it hurts my feelings. And I said, stop. I want you to tell him exactly how you feel. By the time he was finished, he was in tears because that behavior dehumanizes him, and white people need to see that. I did not want him to give the rote answer. I wanted him to give the answer that's in his spirit, that was in his heart. Every time he goes home, that pain he feels, you need to know about that because you're causing it based on your prejudices. And again, I said I did the talk, The Elephant in the Room, Why Are All Women Making Gains in Tech? And one of the reasons why all women aren't making gains in tech, because feminism is about white women. The suffrage movement, you left out people of color, particularly black women. The women's movement, you left out people of color, particularly black women. And now, because you have issues with your movement, you expect us to be interested? No. We're fighting for our lives and the lives of our communities. We have other things to think about. These are things you need to think about. Also, I'm going to challenge you. The next time someone of color, particularly a black woman, if you're in a job environment and you disagree, before you shed a tear, if she's not popped you in your damn face, think about it. Because what you do when you go to HR and says, oh, I felt attacked. All these words that you use, that goes in that woman's personnel file. Now you've affected her economically, and you have absolutely no right to do that because she won't get a raise. She won't get a promotion because you were not mature enough to handle your own emotions. It happens every single day. We're going to talk about racism, because people always want to throw that Webster's Dictionary definition of racism, which is just about the cause. How we talk about racism is about the effect. And unless you are a person of privilege and have race prejudice, what I'm saying is black people cannot be racist. Latinx cannot be racist. Native Americans cannot be racist. We have absolutely no power. It's the prejudice plus the power. Now, we can hate you, but that's not racism. And there is no such thing as reverse racism. And I'm going to tell you this, and people get upset. I approach every person, white person I see, by default with mistrust, because I have experienced it. Until you prove that you can be trusted, and this is my life, and based on this definition, you might not like it, you are all racist. It's just a matter of degree of how you act on that. Because I want you to think about the things you think about our communities by default. How safe you feel when we're walking down the street. So, if you have not read, so you want to talk about race, you need to. There are 3 books you need to read. So you want to talk about race? You need to read White Fragility. And you also need to read Stamp from the Beginning, because that's the historical perspective of how white supremacy became our economic, how our schools, how our healthcare, how our politics were based in white supremacy. But this is a simple thing, a simple way to tell if what you're saying is about race. It is if I say it is. You don't get to determine if it's about race. I have the experience of being treated based on race. You don't. So if a person of color thinks it's about race, just own up, it's about race. If it's about race, if it's disproportionately or differently affect people of color. How many of you, when you get pulled over by the cop, think you might get, this might be your last minute on earth? Not many of you. But for us, it is. It's about race if there's a broader pattern. Police officers are not killing you. White young men can go shoot up a school, but some kind of way they can de-escalate that and arrest that person without incident. Don't understand that. But a young black person runs away from the cops because historically he knows he's not safe. He's shot in the back because he stole something. Okay, so the next slide is basically making privileged individuals uncomfortable at 3.0. And it says, whiteness is ignorant to its own history by design and by choice. When I talk about our country, so many people think race came first. It did not. The justification of slavery and of annihilating Native Americans because of manifest destiny came first. And they created an economic system around it to justify that. And a lot of it was used, the Bible was used a lot of that. But if you, that book I was talking about, Stamp from the Beginning, he breaks down that history. Also, you need to listen to a series, that podcast is called Scene on Radio. And last year they did a 14-episode series called Seeing White. And it breaks down the historical perspective of how we came to be a white supremacist, our rules, everything based on white supremacy. So, as I said, the economics came first, and then white supremacist policies and laws were created to justify slavery and the extermination of native populations. White supremacy is more than just the KKK and swastikas. This is why, if you follow me, I've currently started pointing out, I'll retweet something and I'll just put the headline in bold. This is what white supremacy looks like. Because you think it has to be some crazy person. No, it is what we're seeing right now with the Supreme Court. That's white supremacy. What we saw with the police officer who killed the black man in his home, and then you're telling me he had less than an ounce of weed. Why do we care? Why was his home even searched? That's white supremacy. When I just spoke about, there's been research that young white men get a pass in the criminal system, whereas a black person doing the same crime would get more time. That's white supremacy. The fact that I read an article where the judge, some students in Detroit were suing the school system because they said they weren't getting basic literacy. The judge dismissed the case and said they're not old basic literacy. All the school system has to do is house them. Why am I going to school? Then there was an article about California who is now putting poor performing students on not school probation, but criminal probation. So you have on this end saying you're not old literacy, and then now you're going to put me on probation. That's white supremacy. And these are the things that white people don't see, because you're thinking, oh, well, he must have done something, or they're just not paying attention in school. There are things behind. I need you to start looking behind the story. You cannot take what you see on the news at face value. There are stories behind this that you've been shielded from. For the first time, some of you can honestly say that it was only until Trump that you became aware of racism. We had a president for 8 years and you thought everything was hunky-dory. Black people weren't surprised that Trump got elected, because white people have traditionally done things against their own interest in the interest of protecting white supremacy. And it's not just a US thing. Every place in this world has benefited from slavery and still benefiting from slavery. Oh, and my final thing, and this was tech is racist. This is what it is. And this is why we can't make progress. You bring a person of color in there, you bring a person with a disability in there, and the attitude is not welcoming. It is, oh, you're taking a job from me. But what I'm going to tell you is, with affirmative action, do you know how hard a person of color has to get to the door? So what white people are figuring out, particularly you white men, is you're mediocre. And you can't compete with us. And we're showing you up, because we've had to work really, I know growing up, all I heard was, we have to work 2 times as hard as you. That's what we hear every day in our households. So if I already know I work 10 times as hard as you, when I know I'm going to outshine you. I already know if I get the opportunity to get in the door. So we need to be honest about the fact that tech is racist. And then this one slide is, if that last slide, which I just talked about, it triggered anger or desire to challenge me. This is a clear indication that your internalized white supremacy, that is your internalized white supremacy, and it's not my issue, it's yours. You need to work on that. We all have it. We all have it. There are things that I do that I'm like, why did I do that? And it's because I've been taught, because of white supremacist system, that I shouldn't be doing that, and have to check myself. I'm going to give you an example. When you go to a restaurant and you see a black kid sitting at a restaurant, what is he doing? Or any person of color particularly, what are they doing? They're sitting with their parents, right? They might have their little device, but they're sitting right next to them. White kids running all over the restaurant. Because you've been taught that that's your space. You belong there. When we go to stores, before we get out the car, our parents don't touch nothing, don't ask for nothing, don't do. You go into Walmart, you go in there, kids pulling stuff all down. We don't get to do that. No. Civility is an option for white people. It is expected behavior for us. So when I walk down the street and you in my way, I brace myself, because you're running into me. I'm not moving anymore. I'm taking up space because I deserve to be here. When I'm on the plane, dude, your penis is not that big. You might want to close your legs because you're taking up my space. And that's not going to happen anymore because we get in the plane and we do this. We try to cross our legs so we don't take up space. We need to stop doing that. Use that same analogy in when someone comes they're a new employee. Think about how they look when they walk in. They look frightened. They look very uncomfortable. They don't know what's right or wrong. Figure out ways that you can make them feel at home, that you can help accelerate that inclusion process. So this is a bonus. So anybody remember this dude? All right, so he got mad because he didn't get selected to speak at this conference. So he took the opportunity to send this same message to every female who spoke here, but not to Hugh. So that right there tells you he's sexist. He knew better than doing that. So I screenshotted and sent it to old Doc there and said, "What's going on?" And Doc said, he sent us an email, and he said, "But I would recommend you not engaging." Excuse me, Doc, that ain't gonna happen. I'm not gonna not engage. And that's it. He came to me and let this fall, let the chips fall where they may on this one. So now, mind you, he works in Chicago. He has a business. He's worried about my reputation. But you started something with Kim Crayton on Twitter, open forum. Obviously, you don't know what you're doing, right? This was my message. And there were several backs and forths, but by this time, my community knew what to do, right? So he was getting it from all angles. And guess what? Bam, he blocked me. I was like, good, we got him. To me, they think that does something to me, because he was like, oh, I'm unappreciative. Oh, so a white man that I don't know sends me a message and I'm unappreciative because I don't want to hear what you have to say. That's white supremacy. You're so superior. How dare someone pick someone like me over you? He put all those tweets online. He tried to, he went back and tried to delete them, but ooh, we got screenshots. If you're so concerned about reputation, you should have been concerned about your reputation, sir. So this was for Hugh, but he already left, but we did have a conversation. So thank you, and that's me.